John Anderson had it all. He was a millionaire businessman who owned a successful tech company. He lived in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, drove a luxury car, and had everything money could buy. But despite all the riches, John's life was far from complete. He had an aching void in his heart that no amount of wealth could fill. Born into a modest family, John had always been driven. From an early age, he wanted to build something that would leave a legacy. He worked tirelessly, starting his first business right after college. Over the years, his relentless work paid off. His tech company became one of the leading firms in the industry. He expanded globally and was respected by peers and competitors alike. Yet, despite his success, there was something missing, something important he could never quite find in all the boardrooms and conferences. His heart ached with the thought of what he had lost many years ago: a family. John had been married once, and together with his first wife, they had a son. Life had seemed perfect for a while. But as time went on, things between John and his wife began to unravel. The pressures of business, long hours, and growing disagreements led to a bitter divorce. John lost touch with his ex-wife, and soon after, his son disappeared from his life as well. The pain of losing his son was something John never fully recovered from. For years, he searched for him, but no trace could be found. His ex-wife had moved on, remarried, and made it clear that John was no longer a part of their lives. But no matter how hard he worked or how much money he earned, the loneliness never left him. Every achievement felt hollow. He would look at other fathers with their children and feel the sharp sting of regret. Over time, John remarried and had a daughter with his new wife, Emily. Their little girl, Lily, was everything to him. She was sweet, bright, and full of life, and she quickly became the center of his universe. Yet, despite his love for Lily, there was always a nagging thought in the back of his mind. He had failed as a father to his son. He didn't want to make the same mistakes again. He wanted to be the best father he could be for Lily, but he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. The next few days of the trip were a blur for John. He felt like his world had turned upside down. It was hard to wrap his mind around the fact that Noah, the son he thought he would never see again, was now standing right in front of him, living and breathing. The excitement that came with reuniting with his son was tinged with guilt and uncertainty. They had so much to catch up on, so many years lost in the silence of time. The next few weeks were filled with both excitement and uncertainty for John and his family. The vacation that had begun as an opportunity for rest and relaxation had turned into something far more important: a chance to rebuild relationships and heal old wounds. John had always known that family was important, but now, more than ever, he understood just how precious it was. As John and Noah spent more time together, it became clear that they were both still learning how to connect. Their relationship was fragile, a delicate thread woven with the shared pain of the past and the hope for a better future. John often found himself reflecting on the time they had lost, wondering if there was any way to bridge the gap that had grown between them. But with each day, he felt that gap slowly narrowing, one small step at a time. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the warm colors of the sky stretched over the horizon, John and Noah decided to take a walk along the beach. Lily and Emily had stayed behind, deciding to enjoy some quiet time at the resort. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing, and the salty air felt fresh against their skin. It was a moment of calm amidst the whirlwind of emotions they had been navigating. "I used to come to the beach a lot when I was a kid," Noah said, breaking the silence. "But not like this. I was always by myself, just wandering around, not really knowing where I fit in." John glanced at Noah, hearing the quiet sadness in his voice. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you," he said softly. "I wish I had been, that I could have been the father you needed." Noah paused for a moment, watching the waves. "You don't have to apologize anymore," he replied, his voice steady. "I know you were going through a lot. I didn't understand it when I was younger, but I get it now. I don't hold it against you. John felt a sense of relief wash over him. Noah's forgiveness meant more to him than anything he could have imagined. It wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about accepting it, learning from it, and moving forward together. I'm glad you understand, John said, his voice filled with gratitude. I know I can't change what happened, but I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to feel like that again. I'll be here for you, no matter what. Noah smiled, though there was still a trace of sadness in his eyes. I know, Dad. I can see it now. And I'm here too. We'll figure it out, one day at a time. As they continued walking along the beach, the bond between father and son deepened. The conversations that had started as awkward exchanges were slowly becoming easier, more natural. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. John shared stories about his work and the struggles he had faced in building his business. Noah talked about his childhood, the challenges he had overcome, and how he had learned to cope with the absence of his father. But it wasn't just about the hard conversations. They also laughed together, joking about small things, sharing moments of lightness that allowed them to feel like real family again. They made plans to go fishing the next day, something they both loved, and John found himself looking forward to it with a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, as they returned to the villa, John was filled with a sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from avoiding the difficult truths of life, it was the kind that came from facing those truths, accepting them, and choosing to move forward with open arms. When they joined Emily and Lily at the dinner table, John noticed a difference in the way the family interacted. There was a new energy, a sense of unity that hadn't been there before. Emily caught John's eye and gave him a reassuring smile, as if to say, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, John believed it. The next few days were filled with small but meaningful moments. John, Emily, and Noah spent time exploring the local culture, visiting museums, and tasting the local cuisine. Lily, always curious and full of life, asked endless questions about everything they saw and did. She had no idea the significance of the moment, how her father was reconnecting with the brother she had never known, but she was thrilled to have a new sibling to share the adventure with. Noah, too, seemed to be coming out of his shell. He wasn't as guarded as he had been at the start of their reunion. He was starting to open up more, sharing parts of his life that he had kept hidden for so long. It was clear that, while he still had doubts and fears, he was beginning to trust his father again. John could see the transformation in him, and it filled him with hope for the future. One evening, as they all sat outside under the stars, John felt a sense of contentment that he hadn't experienced in years. The family was together, they were happy, and they were healing. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And that was enough. I'm glad we're doing this, John said, his voice quiet but sincere. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that, whatever happens, we'll face it together. Noah looked at him, his expression softening. Yeah. Together, he agreed, his voice full of promise. As the night wore on, the family continued to talk, laugh, and share stories. The world around them seemed to fade away, and for a brief moment, everything felt right. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it had become a part of their story, a part of their journey that had led them to this moment. John looked around at the people he loved, his wife, his daughter, and now his son, and realized that, despite everything that had happened, he had found his way back. The road had been long and difficult, but it had brought him to the place where he was meant to be. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly at home. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but John was no longer afraid. He knew that, with his family by his side, he could face whatever came next. One step at a time, they would rebuild, and one day, they would look back on this moment as the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. At first, everything felt awkward. John tried to find ways to bridge the gap between him and Noah, but there was so much that had been left unsaid, so many questions that lingered in the air. The bond that they should have shared all those years ago was gone, replaced by the cold reality of years spent apart. But despite the discomfort, John knew that rebuilding their relationship was going to take time, and he was willing to give it all the time it needed. As the days passed, John and Noah began spending more time together. Emily and Lily were supportive but gave them the space they needed to start their own healing process. Emily understood that John and Noah needed to figure things out for themselves, and Lily, though confused at first, was happy to have a new brother to play with. She didn't fully understand the complexity of the situation, but she could sense the change in the family dynamic. John took Noah to some of the places they had visited together as a family years ago. They wandered through the small streets of the town, now familiar yet different with the presence of Noah. John tried to explain what had happened all those years ago, how he had been caught up in work and personal struggles, how he had failed as a father. Noah listened quietly, his expression unreadable. It was clear that there was pain in his eyes, but he said little. Instead, he offered John the occasional nod, acknowledging his father's words. For John, every step was a challenge. He had to confront the reality of what he had lost, and he had to face the consequences of his actions. But every time he looked at Noah, he felt a flicker of hope. The son he had thought was gone forever was right there, standing beside him. It was a gift, a second chance that John knew he could not take for granted. One afternoon, they went to a quiet cafe near the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sight, but John couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. They sat across from each other, sipping their drinks in silence. John tried to find the words, but nothing seemed right. Noah finally broke the silence. "It's funny," he said softly, looking out at the ocean. "I always wondered what you would be like, what you'd say if we ever met again. But now that we're here, I don't really know where to start." John nodded, feeling the same uncertainty. "I don't know where to start either," he admitted. "I've spent so long thinking about you, wondering how you were, wishing I could fix everything. But now that you're here, I don't know how to make up for lost time." Noah glanced at him, his eyes thoughtful. "I don't think you can fix everything, Dad. You can't turn back time. But I guess that's the point, isn't it? We're here now. We've got to deal with what's in front of us." John's heart tightened as he heard Noah's words. It was the truth. There was no going back. There was no magical way to undo the years of separation, no way to fix the mistakes of the past. But perhaps there was a way to move forward, to build something new from the ashes of their broken relationship. For the first time in a long time, John smiled a small, genuine smile. "You're right. We can't change the past. But maybe we can create a new future." Noah smiled back, though his eyes were still filled with a mixture of emotions. "I think I'd like that." Over the next few days, the two of them continued to spend time together. They went on long walks along the beach, had conversations about everything and nothing, and began to get to know each other as though they were strangers. They shared stories from their past, laughed at each other's jokes, and even argued about silly things. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that's what mattered. One evening, as they sat by the ocean watching the sun dip below the horizon, John turned to Noah. He wanted to ask more, to know everything about his son's life, the struggles, the triumphs, the moments he had missed. But he held back, not wanting to overwhelm him. Instead, he simply said, "I'm proud of you, Noah. I'm proud of the person you've become." Noah looked at him, his eyes softening. "Thanks, Dad. I'm proud of you too." I know it's been a rough road, but you're here now. That means something. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. John felt a lump in his throat, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just about being proud. It was about redemption. It was about the second chance they had been given, the opportunity to start fresh, to rebuild what had been broken. Later that evening, when the two of them returned to the villa, John found Emily and Lily sitting on the porch, watching the stars. The night had grown quiet, and there was a sense of peace in the air. John sat down next to Emily, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know how things would unfold, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Emily reached over and took his hand, offering a quiet smile. "How's it going?" she asked softly. John squeezed her hand, looking out at the horizon. "It's going," he said. "It's going." Noah joined them shortly after, sitting down with his father and stepmother. For a moment, the four of them sat together in silence, watching the stars twinkle above them. It wasn't the perfect family reunion, but it was something real, a beginning, not an ending. As the night wore on, John realized that healing wasn't about finding a quick fix or erasing the past. It was about taking things one step at a time, being patient with each other, and allowing space for growth. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that with Noah now in his life, there was a chance for a better tomorrow. And for the first time in a long while, John felt at peace. He had his family, and with each passing day, he knew they would get stronger together. One step at a time. The Anderson family's trip was meant to be a time of rest and relaxation. It had been planned for months, a break from the busy schedules that often pulled them in different directions. The destination was an exotic coastal town, famous for its beautiful beaches, lush landscapes, and rich history. It was the perfect place to unwind and create lasting memories. But for John, as much as he tried to focus on the fun of the vacation, there was still an undercurrent of emotion he couldn't shake. For a long moment, everything felt frozen. John stood there, staring at the young man, his mind racing. He could hardly breathe as he tried to process what had just happened. His daughter, Lily, was standing beside him, her small hand gripping his, still staring up at the man she had called her brother. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind, over and over again. "That's my brother." John's heart pounded in his chest, a rush of emotions flooding through him. There was disbelief, confusion, and a flood of guilt. He couldn't comprehend it. His son, the boy he had lost so many years ago, the child he had never seen grow up, was standing right in front of him, just feet away. The same child he had given up on, the same one he had never been there for. How was it possible? The young man stood still, his eyes wide, almost as if he didn't know how to react. He looked at John with the same mixture of shock and recognition. After a few seconds, he cleared his throat, trying to gather his thoughts. I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I couldn't believe it when I saw you. You look just like him." John blinked, still struggling to find his voice. He was lost for words, his throat tight. The man had mentioned someone else. Who was he talking about? He glanced at Lily, who had her hands clasped together, eyes shining with a mix of excitement and curiosity. "Dad, is that really him?" Lily asked innocently, her voice full of wonder. John felt a lump form in his throat. He was no longer sure what to say. How could he explain this to Lily? How could he explain it to himself? There were so many questions he wanted to ask. Was this really his son? Was it possible that he had found him after all these years? Taking a deep breath, John slowly stepped forward. His mind was a whirl of thoughts, but there was one thing he knew for sure: he had to know the truth. He had to understand how all of this was possible. Are you really my son? John finally managed to ask, his voice shaking slightly. The young man's eyes filled with emotion as he looked at John. He nodded slowly, almost cautiously. Yes. My name is Noah. Noah Anderson. John's heart stopped. Anderson. That was his last name. It couldn't be a coincidence. He looked at Noah more closely, his heart sinking as he took in the familiar features. The way Noah carried himself, his eyes, the shape of his jaw, all of it. He was the child John had never known. I'm sorry, Noah said again, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't know how to find you. I didn't even know if you'd want to see me. John's mind reeled. He had so many questions. How had Noah ended up here? Why hadn't he contacted him sooner? What had happened in all the years they had been apart? But all those questions were lost for a moment as the reality of the situation set in. His son, the one he thought he'd never see again, was standing in front of him, speaking to him as though they had never been apart. Lily, sensing the tension, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. John kneeled down to her level, his hands shaking as he gently cupped her face. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he whispered, though his voice betrayed him. Just give me a minute." Lily nodded, looking from her father to Noah with confusion still on her face. She was too young to fully understand the gravity of the situation, but John could see that she was trying. He stood up slowly and turned to Noah. This is all so much," John said, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know what to think. I never expected to find you, not like this." Noah looked at John with a mix of longing and uncertainty. "I didn't expect to find you either," he said quietly. "I've spent years wondering what happened. Why you weren't there. I always wanted to know why you left. But I've learned to live with it." John's heart broke as he listened to Noah's words. He had thought about this moment for years, wondering what his son would be like, what he had missed. But hearing Noah's words, hearing the pain in his voice, it hit John harder than anything he had imagined. "I'm so sorry," John whispered. "I was young, and I made mistakes. I should have tried harder. I should have been there. I don't know how to make up for all the lost time." Noah was silent for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "I understand. I know you weren't perfect. I've come to terms with it. But I never stopped wondering what happened. What could have been." John stepped closer, his heart aching as he reached out a hand. "Can we start over?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. "I know it's going to be hard, but I want to be here for you. I want to make things right. I can't change the past, but I can try to be the father you deserve from now on." Noah hesitated for a moment, looking at John as though weighing his words. Finally, he nodded, his expression softening. "I don't know where we go from here, but I'm willing to try." Tears welled up in John's eyes as he pulled Noah into a hug. For a brief moment, it felt like everything stopped. The years of pain, the lost time, the regrets, it all faded away. He held his son tightly, as if trying to make up for every moment they had missed. Noah was hesitant at first, unsure of how to react, but then he wrapped his arms around John, slowly letting the emotion of the moment take over. "I've missed you," John whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Noah said nothing, but his grip tightened, and for the first time in a long time, John felt as though he was no longer carrying that heavy weight of regret. It wasn't the end of their story, but it was beginning a new chapter. As they pulled apart, John smiled at his son. "We've got a lot of time to make up for. But we'll take it one step at a time, okay?" Noah nodded, a small smile forming on his face. "Yeah. One step at a time." And just like that, the journey of healing began. The family arrived at their beachfront resort after a long flight, and the sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the ocean. The air smelled of salt water and fresh coconut, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming. Lily, excited and full of energy, ran ahead to explore the resort, while Emily followed closely behind, taking in the beauty of the place. John lagged behind for a moment, his thoughts still lingering on the past. He tried to shake the feeling, reminding himself that this trip was about making new memories with the people he loved. As the family settled into their luxurious villa, the stress of the work week began to fade, replaced by the tranquility of the tropical setting. The resort was everything they had hoped for. The villa had large glass windows that looked out over the ocean, and the interior was furnished with tropical woods and bright, cheerful colors. Lily couldn't wait to dive into the pool, while Emily began unpacking their things. John decided to step outside onto the balcony, needing a moment to himself. Standing there, watching the waves roll in, John couldn't help but reflect on the past. He thought about his son, the years he had missed, and the family he once had. He felt a pang of regret, a longing for the relationship he could never get back. But he knew that he had to let go of the past and focus on the present. His daughter needed him, and his wife needed him. He couldn't continue to carry the weight of what he had lost. Later that evening, the family gathered around a table on the resort's terrace, enjoying a fresh seafood dinner. The conversation flowed easily, and Lily kept them entertained with her excitement about the trip. She told her parents about the treasures she hoped to find at the local market and the new friends she hoped to make at the kids' club. John smiled, proud of her bright spirit. Emily laughed at the stories Lily told, and for a moment, John felt at peace. The next morning, they set off to explore the town. They strolled through the cobblestone streets, passing colorful shops and small cafes. The sun was hot, but there was a gentle breeze in the air, keeping them cool. They came across a vibrant local market, filled with the smell of exotic fruits and the sound of vendors calling out their wares. John couldn't help but feel a sense of adventure as he watched his wife and daughter haggle with the shopkeepers, picking out souvenirs and trinkets to bring back home. As they continued to explore, they came across a small, quiet alleyway that led to a hidden courtyard. The courtyard was lined with lush greenery, with a small fountain at its center. The peaceful atmosphere was the perfect escape from the busy market, and the family decided to sit for a while, enjoying the shade and the calm. John leaned back against the stone wall, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. It was moments like these that reminded him of how lucky he was. He had a family, a beautiful wife, and a daughter who adored him. But deep down, he still carried the weight of the past. Lily, ever the curious child, wandered off to explore the garden. As John watched her, a sense of joy filled him. She was so full of life, so eager to learn about the world around her. In a way, Lily had filled the hole in his heart that had been left by his son. But even as he enjoyed these moments with her, there was still a lingering sadness, a question that remained unanswered: would he ever find a way to make peace with the son he had lost? It was then that Emily noticed something strange. A young man was standing near the entrance to the courtyard, just outside the gate. He appeared to be watching them, his eyes focused on John. Emily looked at him curiously, wondering if he was lost or perhaps a local resident. The man was tall, with dark hair and a strong build. He looked like he had just stepped out of a photograph from a long time ago, someone John had seen in his memories but never in person. John didn't notice at first, lost in his thoughts, but Emily's eyes followed the man's gaze. She didn't recognize him, and there was something about the way he looked at John that made her uncomfortable. Emily gently nudged John, drawing his attention to the young man. When he turned around to see who she was pointing to, something inside him jolted. He felt a rush of familiarity, something in the young man's posture, the way he held himself. It was like looking at a mirror of his younger self. The man smiled faintly, and there was a brief moment of silence before he took a few hesitant steps forward. Emily felt a sudden tension in the air, but before she could ask John if he knew the young man spoke. "Excuse me," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "I couldn't help but notice, you look just like someone I used to know." John's heart skipped a beat. He stood there for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The man's words had struck a chord deep inside him. The resemblance was uncanny. Could it be possible? Could this man be someone he once knew? Or was it all just a coincidence? Lily, still exploring the garden, suddenly turned around and ran toward them, excitedly shouting, "Daddy! Look, I found something amazing." But just as she reached her father's side, she stopped short, her eyes wide with surprise. She looked at the young man, then back at John, her face lighting up as she pointed to him. "That's my brother," she exclaimed, her voice full of joy. John's body went rigid. The world seemed to stand still. His heart stopped for a moment. The words that his daughter had just spoken echoed in his mind. "That's my brother." John looked from Lily to the young man, who now stood frozen in place, just as shocked as John was. 1,000 thoughts raced through John's mind, but none of them made sense. It couldn't be. Could it? This couldn't be happening, not here, not now. His son, his lost son, was standing right in front of him. John tried his best to move forward. He made sure to give Lily everything she could ever want. They went on vacations together, had family outings, and celebrated every milestone in her life. Still, there were times when John would sit alone in his study, staring at old photos of his son, wishing he could turn back time and fix things. But time, as it often does, kept moving forward, and John knew he couldn't undo the past. One evening, as John was working late, Emily walked into his office with a warm cup of tea. She noticed that he was lost in thought, staring at an old family picture on his desk. She could see the sadness in his eyes. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" Emily asked softly, sitting down beside him. John didn't respond immediately. The weight of the conversation had become too much over the years. He nodded slowly, looking at the photograph of his son, who was just a little boy in that picture, a boy he hadn't seen in over a decade. "I just wonder what he's doing now, Emily," John said, his voice low. "I wonder if he ever thinks about me. I know I've made mistakes, but I miss him every day." Emily reached out and took his hand, offering silent support. She had always known how much John missed his son, and although she couldn't completely understand the pain he felt, she knew how much it weighed on him. "Maybe one day, he'll find you," she said gently. "But for now, you have us. You have me, and you have Lily. You're not alone in this." John smiled weakly, appreciating his wife's words. He knew she was right. He had a family now, his daughter, who brought him so much joy. He couldn't let his past mistakes ruin the present. Still, the ache in his heart remained. As the years passed, John focused on building his business empire even more, trying to distract himself from his personal struggles. But the thoughts of his son never fully disappeared. John's relationship with his daughter was a positive one, but he couldn't help but feel that something was missing. He often found himself staring at Lily, wondering how his son would have turned out, how different his life would have been if he had been there for him. Lily, of course, was unaware of the history between her father and his son. To her, her dad was just the man who played with her in the park, helped her with schoolwork, and made her laugh. He was her rock. But John's inner turmoil remained, quietly simmering beneath the surface. Every moment of happiness he shared with his daughter was tinged with the pain of his lost relationship with his son. The family lived a comfortable life, traveling around the world, enjoying their vacations, and living in their beautiful home. But despite all the luxury, John sometimes felt hollow. He had everything he had ever wanted in terms of material wealth, but what good was it if he couldn't make up for the lost time with his son? In the quiet moments, when Lily was asleep and Emily was reading her book, John would find himself alone, replaying the moments when he had failed as a father. He had missed out on so many important years: his son's first steps, his first words, the little victories in life. Those moments were gone, and he could never get them back. The thought was a constant weight on his heart. One day, while preparing for a family trip, John found an old journal he had kept during his son's early years. The pages were yellowed, but the memories were still fresh. There were entries about birthday parties, family outings, and moments of joy. But there were also notes about the painful arguments, the breakup, and the final decision to part ways with his first wife. As he read through the pages, John felt a mix of sadness and regret. He had failed not just as a husband but as a father. With the trip just around the corner, John tried to focus on the present. The vacation was meant to be a time for the family to bond, a time for Lily to make memories with both her parents. He hoped this trip would be different, that maybe it would help him move forward and leave the past behind. But deep inside, he knew there was a bigger issue he had to face. He couldn't keep running from the mistakes of the past. He had to confront them, even if it meant facing the truth. As the day of the trip arrived, John tried to push aside his conflicting emotions. It was time to move forward, and he was determined to enjoy this vacation with his family. Little did he know that this trip would change his life forever.